All right, so we're just about 21 minutes away from our arrival at waypoint 1. So if you're just tuning in, we're already well into our kind of final rendezvous steps. We passed waypoint 0, which was just 400 meters below the station, and Dragon right now is executing a maneuver that's swinging it out in front and over top until we're directly in front of that docking port on the space-facing side of the Harmony module. So we've got about 20 minutes until we get there. The teams here in Hawthorne monitoring, the crew on board Dragon monitoring, we're looking over their shoulders right now, and the teams out in Mission Control Houston also standing by as we're well into our integrated operations. Let's do a quick check-in with everybody over there. Shaniqua, give us an update. How's the team in Mission Control Houston doing? How's the crew doing as we get through this final approach?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So far this afternoon, the crew on the station is doing good, and so is the flight directors and the flight controllers in Houston, Mission Control Houston currently. Crew woke up on station around 3:30 p.m. Central Time after a nap period and began preparations for Crew 4's arrival. This included, as you discussed earlier, some casas or some temporary living quarters for the additional crew members and setting up that special software in the station's cupola to track Dragon's approach and docking. NASA astronaut and current station commander Tom Marshburn will be primed for monitoring and making sure Dragon Freedom stays in the expected zones. Once Dragon is docked, it will join 5 parked vehicles at the International Space Station, including SpaceX Dragon Endurance, which is what brought up Crew 3 astronauts back in November. The Northrop Grumman Cygnus space freighter, Russia's Soyuz MS-21 cruise ship, and Progress 79 and 80 resupply ships. Again, after docked, Marshburn will also be primed to start hatch opening operations. He'll start by opening the large hatch on the Node 2 Zenith port, giving him access to the pressurized mating adapter. The crew will then have to pressurize the vestibule, which is that small space between the hatches on the Dragon and the space station. This was previously exposed to vacuum prior to docking, so the crew will need to fill it with air and make sure its pressure is nearly equal to that of the atmospheric pressure on the Dragon and the station. Again, Dan mentioned 14.7 psi. Marshburn will also release a small valve on the station's hatch to slowly introduce the air on the station's vestibule, and flight controllers here in Mission Control Houston will monitor and verify the pressure readings to make sure everything is leak-free before we get ready to open up the hatches. Currently, NASA Flight Director Adi Boulos is leading the team here in Mission Control Houston for Dragon's approach and docking. Right next to him is the Capcom, Alex Kanalenkos, who will be communicating with the crew aboard the station. Right now, there are currently 7 astronauts and cosmonauts living and working on the International Space Station, including NASA's Kayla Barron, Raja Chari, Tom Marshburn, European Space Agency astronaut Matthias Maurer, and Roscosmos cosmonauts Sergei Korsakov, Oleg Artemyev, and Denis Matveyev. Crew 4 joining will bring the crew complement to 11. Again, we're very excited to get the crew aboard. And that's it, Dan. We're looking good over here in Mission Control Houston. Back over to you guys in Hawthorne.
All right, thanks so much, Shaniqua. And for everybody just now tuning in across NASA social media accounts, welcome. We got this view just for you. This is a look at the International Space Station from the Dragon spacecraft Freedom as it's in the final stages of its approach. We've essentially moved out directly in front of the space station right now. So we're looking right at a docking port on the Node 2 forward where another Dragon is currently docked. We're going to continue up about 90 degrees until Dragon's directly over top of the station, just 220 meters away from its docking port. And at that point, we'll be at what's known as waypoint 1. Pretty soon, the teams are going to do just a final go, no go to proceed past waypoint 1 and on to waypoint 2. At which point we'll stop just 20 meters away from the space station's docking port, do a final check on Dragon systems.
SpaceX on Dragon to ground. No status update to report, just checking in. Vehicle continues to look healthy as we swing around to waypoint 1.
We're getting a look at the core Jake Vendel, who's just over our shoulder here in MCCX. And right on cue, here comes the sun. We're now entering into that orbital daytime.
If you look closely there, you can see the various Draco thrusters firing. There's a total of 16 of them on board Dragon. 12 of them are located around the body or the base of Dragon. And then there are 4 located around the forward hatch. Those are the forward Draco thrusters. Since Dragon is approaching the space station, whenever you see those forward thrusters fire, it's basically, course correcting, almost like slowing Dragon down. But it looks like we're primarily utilizing the bulkhead thrusters. I mean, not the bulkhead, the side thrusters.
Yeah, we'll be using those service sections because we're doing what's essentially a translational maneuver. So in your orbital mechanics, that's moving side to side, up, down, and then we've used those forward bulkheads for all of our kind of pushing thrusts as we were chasing down the space station. So as we're in this sunrise, lighting conditions are perfect to see some of those thruster firings. You're seeing it as Dragon just autonomously fine-tunes its path right up until we hit waypoint 1 in a little under 14 minutes from now.
The propellants that we use on Dragon are actually loaded onto Dragon several days, a couple weeks actually, prior to launch itself. We do all of that prop loading over at a place called Area 59 or Dragonland, which is at Kennedy. And those propellants are monomethylhydrazine and nitrogen tetroxide. And they combust instantaneously when they meet each other. So there's basically, 2 different types of holding tanks for those propellants. And then whenever Dragon quickly flows those propellants into the combustion chamber of the Draco engines, because of their properties, they boom, fire as soon as they touch. This is different than how we make fire on Falcon 9, for example. In that case, with the liquid oxygen and the rocket-grade kerosene, the RP1, those 2 propellants do not ignite when they touch. You actually need an ignition source. So for that, we use TTEB. But in space, we don't want to use an ignition source. This version where we use what are called hypergolic fuels, or hypergolic propellants, is safer for space, and it's much faster of a reaction. And as you can see, with these tiny bursts from various directions, we need Dragon to be quick. We need those thrusters to they're really more like impulses, more so than just flat out burns.
Yeah, those hypergols come with the additional benefit of not requiring what's called cryogenic storage. So as you see Falcon 9 fueled, we're using that ultra densified LOX, and to keep fuels super cold takes a lot of energy, a lot
Absolutely.
of power. And you can do that when you have an entire ground support system. Maintaining a cryogenic fuel inside a small space like a spacecraft, not really feasible, which is why it's extremely common to see these hypergolic fuels used for onboard thrusters. We use the exact same mix in the European service module for the Orion spacecraft. And in fact, almost the opposite of the Falcon 9 fuels, we actually have heaters that we have on the tanks. For those hypergolic fuels, just as you can store them much closer to almost a room temperature, which is one of their real draws for use, in addition to the simplicity that Kate talked about, where you don't need that extra ignition source. So we're still swinging around. We're just about 10.5 minutes away from our waypoint number 1, which will put Dragon just 220 meters above the space station. It'll still be outside of what's known as the keep out sphere. That's our second imaginary shape around the space station that just helps to govern the rules for approaching spacecraft. Before you're in the keep out sphere, you have to be on what's essentially a 4-orbit or about a 6-hour free safe trajectory, where if we completely lost control of Dragon, it wouldn't move inside of that sphere, which is about 200 meters in radius around the station. And so what you're looking at, this is the maneuver we're on right now. We're a little more than halfway up that kind of half circle line that you see on the left, as we've moved from waypoint 0 and we're moving on up to waypoint 1. So we've already moved out directly in front. We're now moving directly over the docking port on node 2, where Dragon Freedom is headed today. So the integrated teams here at MCCX and over in Houston are doing joint polls. It's one of everybody's favorite things in spaceflight is go, no goes. And so they do these joint polls, and we're just constantly assessing, not only making sure Dragon's ready, but all the systems on board station are ready. We do a couple of configurations to the station to get ready for the docking. We do what's called feathering, just a special orientation of the solar arrays to help give them additional protection from any plumes or just those thruster firings. Those can leave a residue if you don't, and that's any spacecraft that's flying, and so we always orient the solar arrays. We also are going to be changing up how we do the attitude control on station during this final approach. Typically we're using the large gyroscopes on the US section just for nominal attitude control. And then when we get into the actual final approach and docking, we hand over that control to the thrusters on the Russian segment, who can provide a much more kind of fine-tuned propulsive attitude control for that final approach. Just checking in, we're about 7 minutes 40 seconds away from the arrival at waypoint 1. Dragon at a range of about 320 meters. At this point, Dragon using a couple of different navigational tools to make its approach autonomously. We're 7 minutes away from waypoint 1. And again, as everything continues to look good on Dragon Freedom, thrusters performing nominally, we've got all the navigational tools that we need for final approach. We'll be able to move in from waypoint 1 down to waypoint number 2, just 20 meters away from station. And then we will stop at waypoint 2, and the teams will do just a final check-in, and they'll give the go for final approach. And then after final approach is complete, again, we'll be moving at a pretty slow pace. We'll get that initial contact, Dragon using the soft capture system to interlock with the International Docking Adapter. And then that soft capturing will start to retract, bring the spacecraft in, and then we get ready for what's called the hard mate, where we drive 12 hooks that will securely hold Dragon to the docking port. 6 of those hooks have actually already been used on this flight. They hold down the docking or the nose cone during the ascent portion, And then those are one of the first real checkouts, or one of the first real operations after Dragon separates from Falcon 9, is to open those hooks and get the nose cone open, revealing all of our navigation tools in those forward bulkhead thrusters.
Now, as Dragon, we just started to move out of view there. We got another view here. We can see that it is slowly but surely making its approach to the International Space Station. Once again, this is the Crew 4 crew, a long-duration mission to the International Space Station. They launched earlier today. Actually, just this morning, we had liftoff at 12:52 a.m. Pacific time, and everything was super go for our conditions. You know, as we talked about before, weather is always a determining factor in whether or not we get to go to space. And while weather at the Cape was a little challenging throughout the week, we were able to get the Crew 4 crew out with, really gorgeous conditions for a nighttime launch. And everything has been going really well, very smoothly. The crew had a sleep period, just a scheduled period where they had to go to sleep in preparation for docking activities, which we are, coming up to. They've had 2 meals at this point, and as of right now, they are buckled into their seats with their spacesuits on, and they are monitoring the approach of Dragon capsule to the International Space Station. Dragon is fully autonomous, so it is flying itself right now. The crew acts as a backup to the system, essentially, but Dragon is doing all the calculations in real time, taking all the data coming in from the station, from Mission Control Center here in Hawthorne, from Mission Control Center in Houston, all of these inputs, analyzing them in real time and making those course corrections, which we just saw there. That's what happens whenever we see those Draco thrusters firing, and that's essentially just Dragon steering itself to the next location that it has to go to, which in this case is waypoint 1.
We should be just about 3 minutes away from there. So after that, we'll just be about 220 meters. Right now, we're 250 meters away. So even as it's making this kind of swing up and around, it's moved in a little bit closer from that 400 meter range, and we are down at waypoint 0. And then things do pick up after we get to waypoint 1. We move in about 200 more meters until we hit waypoint 2, stopping just about 20 meters, 60 feet or so in the docking port, and then we wait for that final go for approach and docking. And then after they get docked, there's a flurry of activity that happens both inside Dragon and on the station side. On board Dragon, they'll get to go to doff or get out of their suits, and they set them up to dry, essentially attaching them
Dragon,
to fans.
SpaceX on the big loop. Approach 1 and soft capture ring extension will begin shortly. Dragon will continue approach to waypoint 2.
The core here in Hawthorne, Jake Vendel, giving the Crew Dragon Freedom astronauts a heads up that we're going to just proceed right past waypoint 1, which we'll hit in under a minute and a half from now, and move directly in towards waypoint 2. And that soft capture ring is going to extend out from the docking mechanism on Dragon. That's what's going to make that initial contact. It's essentially 3 large metal pedal-like structures that are going to interlock with the international docking adapter. And after they make that initial contact, it'll retract, bring Dragon in close, essentially right up until forming a perfect seal, and then we can enable those hard capture rings, 12 in total, to securely attach Dragon to station. 45 seconds until arrival at waypoint 1. And we'll get an updated time after we get through waypoint 1, but we should be just about 20 minutes away from docking.
You can see lots of Draco thruster firings there. And we're just about to waypoint 1.
And we got confirmation, so we're through waypoint 1. And we're moving on now to waypoint 2.
Again, these are primarily the service section Draco thrusters that are firing, essentially meaning they are located on the sides of Dragon, as opposed to the forward Draco thrusters, which are located at the top of Dragon, under the nose cone and around the hatch. Now, you know, with waypoint 1 complete, initial contact.
Dragon and station SpaceX on the big loop. Expect reconfiguration of the C2V2 link shortly.
Copy. Station copies.
All right, so that initial contact between Dragon and the International Space Station is expected in about 30 minutes. Now, before reaching waypoint 1, mission operators conducted a go, no-go poll.
Station on the big loop. Station is ready for docking.
All right, we just heard Tom Marshburn on board the space station. They're ready.
Houston, copy.
All right, good news there. So conducted a poll to allow Dragon to begin that approach to waypoint 2, which is located inside that keep-out sphere, which is about 20 meters away from the space station. So we keep talking about these invisible shapes. They're all intended primarily for safety of the crew, both onboard Dragon and onboard station.
Yeah, and we do this with every vehicle, crew, and cargo, where we just have these checkpoints built in. And you put it beautifully earlier. It's very similar to a countdown for launch, where we have these times, we have these moments built in to make sure all the different teams are in sync, because we're constantly not just making sure that everything's looking good on Dragon, but also that all the systems on board the space station are ready to go. That's why we're in what we call these integrated operations. And as I've said a couple of times, we're going to be doing it slow and steady at this point. Right now, we're just about 170 meters away from the station. We're going to get to waypoint 2 and pause, and then we're going to wait for that final go, no go. The latest docking time we're looking at right now, it's about 18 minutes from now. So it should be coming at around 4:42 p.m. Pacific time. We'll get an exact docking time when it happens, but we are still moving ahead of schedule. We're still about 40 minutes ahead of when we thought we were going to dock, and this was already one of the fastest, or if not the fastest docking we've done on a Crew Dragon so far. We're just continuing to stay ahead of schedule.
Yeah, for sure. Now, at that 20-meter distance from the station's docking adapter, Dragon's approach will slow, and it'll begin to align itself with the adapter to come in for the final approach.
Yeah, and we heard the soft capture ring is being extended, so that's just moving out a little bit from that very top part of Dragon underneath the nose cone, and it'll make that initial soft capture, essentially using those metal pedals to interlock with the international docking adapter. And after that contact is made, the ring on Dragon will retract, bring Dragon in a little bit closer, and then we can start the hard capture sequence. And so Dragon soft capture ring has a bunch of dampers in the rotary springs, and that just lessens the force as it brings it in a little bit closer, and we make that initial contact with the station. And after that, we can engage those hooks and have a hard mate, and then get ready to go through hatch ops.
Whenever I'm explaining the process to younger people, I often like to reference the movie Interstellar, because there's a couple scenes in there where the spacecraft is docking to that space station, and there's like this great visual of the hooks locking in. And while the design is certainly different for this space station and for Dragon, that is what we're talking about when we refer to as hooks, really locking in to the Dragon capsule for that hard capture.
All right, so we're just about 6.5 minutes away from our arrival at waypoint 2. So at this point, Dragon's pointed straight at the docking port. Right now, again, that docking port is on the top part of the space station. Dragon's looking straight down at the space station. And if we are lucky enough to get a couple more views from Dragon, we'll be looking directly down at planet Earth behind the station as well. And it's going to continue to move into waypoint 2. We're going to pause just 20 minutes away. We expect that to happen in about a little under 6 minutes from now. And then we get that final go, no go for today, that final go, no go for docking, after which the team on the ground here in Hawthorne sends a command, and Dragon begins its final approach.
Yeah, and we should note that while the other pause points were able to be skipped, essentially, that is one that is not skipped because of that go, no go, that final go, no go point. So waypoint 2 is up next, and again, that puts Dragon only 20 meters away from the space station. From there, the spacecraft will focus on
Station Houston on the Big Loop. Station crew Dragon is transmitting docking camera video. Please confirm video and data updating in Dragon docking monitor.
basically just asking the crew, can you see the live camera views?
You can confirm video and data in Dragon docking monitor.
Houston copies.
Awesome. So there's a shot there of Mission Control Center here at Hawthorne, California on the left-hand side, and then, of course, Mission Control Center at Johnson Space Center in Houston on the right-hand side.
Dragon, SpaceX on the Big Loop. We see the onboard for our GPS. No immediate concerns. Dragon is navigating on Dragonite.
And so that call up right there, so our GPS is the relative GPS system. Again, that's one of several navigational tools Dragon has. Basically GPS sensors on Dragon, talking to those on station. That's used for a lot of the approach when we're still quite a ways out still. But as you just heard, the crew told, Dragon Eyes are those primary tools that we're using now.
SpaceX on the Big Loop, C2V2 link reconfiguration and soft capture ring extension complete. With the RGPS-1 failure, we are still go for docking.
And so again, just that quick update to the crew. Still go for docking. We're using the Dragon Eye. There's two on board Dragon. We're using one with another one for redundancy for that final approach. Dragon Eye using LiDAR, essentially bouncing lasers off of reflectors on the space station. Also using a thermal imager to get range rate.
On the Big Loop, ground teams have pulled go for approach 2. Upon confirmation of crew readiness, we will enable the approach.
There's a good call. So the teams down here on the ground have pulled. The Dragon's healthy and in a good config. Station's healthy and in a good config. And so we'll pause when we get to 20 meters. And then as soon as the crew on Dragon tells us that they're ready, the team here in Hawthorne will send a command and we'll begin with final approach.
Yeah, so just a good example there of really, as you mentioned before, these are integrated operations, right? It is mission control there that you see on your screen, located here just behind Dan and I at SpaceX headquarters, that mission control center from Johnson Space Center, and the crew on board station and the crew on board Dragon. And as you just said, just checking in with the crew on Dragon. Hey, you ready to do this? And get the final go from them.
We also heard the crew on station is getting video from Dragon, and they have a number of displays that they're able to see that video with overlays, making sure, again, they're inside the docking corridor and things like that. If you followed the AX-1 docking, that hung us up at waypoint 2 for a little while, as we had an issue on station getting that video routed. Not an issue at all today. And with these missions, with a NASA crew on board Dragon, they're actually prime in the in the command tree for that final approach monitoring on board.
On the big loop, visors are down a lot.
All right, so Commander Kjell Lindgren just reporting the crews close their visors, they're locked in. We're just about a minute and a half away from arrival at waypoint 2.
Yeah, so essentially that means that
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop, we copied your last, visors down. We just enabled the approach. As a final reminder, once Dragon is inside the crew hands-off point, retreat and breakout are not permitted.
Station Houston on the big loop. Dragon is continuing approach and is go for docking. Monitor for steps 5 and 6 in procedure 1.102 Dragon approach and retreat monitoring.
Copies. We're monitoring in steps 5 and 6 at this time.
all right, that crew hands-off point that we heard mentioned essentially means that Dragon is the one that has to initiate that docking abort. The crew is not the one to do that. Again, this is Dragon just driving itself autonomously. It's taking all the data coming in from station, from Houston, from Hawthorne, and making those precise calculations, as well as utilizing those Dragon eyes that are on board, that LiDAR, which is just using lasers, and the thermal imaging, really to make that final approach and that precise docking. There you can see a view of Mission Control Center here in Hawthorne. These, right behind Dan and I, the crew, we heard before, their visors are down, meaning that their suits are now also their primary breathing device. So the spacesuit acts as an extension of the capsule itself. The crews have their spacesuits on, their visors down and in the locked position, but they are plugged in using an umbilical to their seat, which provides telemetry and communications and air. So right now we are flowing nitrox, which is nitrogen-oxygen mixture, through the suits, and not only does it allow them to breathe, but it also keeps them cool. So it's a cool nitrox mixture, and really ultimately just intended to keep them comfortable and obviously safe.
And so at this point, we've moved past waypoint 2, and we heard a bunch of the comms up to that crew. So we were given the final go for docking. And so right now, we should just be about 4 minutes away or so. And we don't have video at the moment. We're in kind of a period where we're waiting to reacquire contact with our TDRS, our tracking data and relay satellites, to get that live video back. We should get it back within the next 2 minutes or so, so we should have those views of docking. We promise we're not just showing you us because we want to. As soon as we get views of that Dragon again for that final approach, we'll be bringing it to you. We should be just about 3.5 minutes, a little bit more, from docking. As you heard, we're going to hear a call out for crew hands-off point. They'll just call up CHOP. And that, as Kate said, that just telling the crew they are not to send any commands to abort. At that point, any abort commands will come automatically from Dragon's flight computer. So we're in our final approach. We're just about 15 meters away from the space station. Should be docking in just about 3 minutes from now. So we've continued to get further and further ahead on our timeline. I think we were looking at about a 5:15 p.m. Pacific docking. Now we're looking to do that almost 45 minutes early.
Yeah, which is great. The crew lifted off from Kennedy Space Center, pad 39A at 12:52 a.m. this morning, and so it's been a pretty busy day for them. As I've said before, they did go through a sleep phase, which was 8 hours, where they had the ability, or rather the time to sleep. Whether or not they were able to get to sleep, I hope so. But there's about an hour before that crew sleep period called pre-sleep, and then there's about an hour after the sleep period called post-sleep. And it's, just an opportunity for them to wind down, but then also wind back up in preparation for, all the activities that we've had today and still have upcoming. As Dan said, we're just a couple minutes early.
SpaceX copies 10 meters.
We are less than 10 meters away, so just about 2 minutes from docking, and so might be right on the edge of getting that video signal back, but the teams, and we're still getting telemetry, so we'll be able to know when that docking has occurred, and hopefully we'll get our high data rate communication back soon and be able to bring that live video. But they're closing in. We're just 8 meters away now, about 1.5 minutes from docking. We'll hear that call out for CHOP come about 20 to 30 seconds before that initial contact, which again is that soft capture ring on Dragon's docking mechanism interfacing with the international docking adapter on board the space station. We're driving in towards the zenith port, the space-facing port on Node 2, and we've got just 6 meters to go.
Again, Dragon is driving itself at this point in time, so hopefully when we get our views back, we'll be able to show you. And there we just heard the call.
SpaceX copies 5 meters.
5 meters away from that that initial contact point.
And we're under 1 minute away from docking. All right. Coming up on 3 meters and closing. 2.5 meters away, docking in about 30 seconds.
Copy, 2 meters.
Meter.
1 meter and closing. We heard confirmation.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop, contact and soft capture complete, attenuation in progress.
And confirmation, soft capture and docking confirmed. That time 4:37 p.m. Pacific, 11:37 GMT, with the International Space Station flying 261 statute miles over the central Pacific Ocean. And there we got it.
That's a gorgeous view. Now, of course, there are still a few steps that we have to complete before Dragon is securely attached to station.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop, soft capture ring retraction is in progress.
There's our first full view of Dragon. Dragon Freedom attached to the International Space Station. Up next, we are going to begin the hard capture sequence. That's essentially when we are engaging the hooks around the docking mechanism.
Well, unfortunately, we did have that video cut out right at that moment of docking, but it's great to see it attached now. Again, that initial contact, that docking time, 4:37 p.m. Pacific, 11:37 GMT, with Dragon and Station flying 261 miles over the central part of the Pacific Ocean. And we heard the retraction of the docking ring is underway, so slowly see Dragon inch a little bit closer to the docking adapter, and then we can kick off that hard capture sequence. All told, it'll take about 10 minutes for everything to finish after we've, completed that initial soft capture. We'll get those 12 docking hooks engaged, basically doing them two sets, one set of 6 at a time, after which we'll have hard mate, and then all of the post-docking configs can get put into work, including umbilicals, and then the crew's starting to step through all of their post-docking, crew on board Dragon getting out of their suits, the crew on board station getting ready to go through the hatch operations.
So with this view here, we are able to see those Draco thrusters that we saw in action quite a bit throughout the approach maneuvers. Well, the Dragon capsule to me is upside down, but for the orientation that it's in, right there, kind of in the center of the pressurized section, that shiny bright white area, we see 3 ports that are kind of like ovals. There are 4 clusters with 3 ports all around the base or the service structure of Dragon, and those are those service structure Draco thrusters that we utilize for that precise maneuvering as the Dragon approaches the International Space Station. I believe you can also identify that green light that we were talking about. So there's a green one and a red one indicating what side is port, which side is starboard. Don't ask me which one is which. I don't like deep water, so I'm not really ever to be on a boat. But yeah, the green light there you can see on the left-hand side of Dragon.
Thanks to a quick refresher, port's the left side, starboard's the right side.
Dragon, SpaceX on the big loop, ring retraction complete, docking sequence is holding for MCS reconfiguration.
Okay, so the soft capture ring has drawn in. Now before we start to engage those hooks, we're going to do another reconfig of the MCS. That's the motion control system on board station. During the approach and initial contact, we're under all of our attitude controls being done by thrusters on the Russian segment. We do that with any approaching visiting vehicle. Now that docking has occurred, we're going to hand over control back to the U.S. gyroscopes, which do our nominal or just our normal day-to-day attitude control. And so that puts station in a much more kind of quiescent. It won't be able to make any rapid adjustments, which could interfere with the driving of those hooks. So as soon as the station teams have confirmed that we've handed over attitude control over to the U.S. system, they'll be able to start driving in those 12 hooks to secure Dragon in place.
Fun little fact.
Station Houston on the big loop, MCS configured, proceeding with hook driving.
Station copies.
We were talking about the red light and the green light. John Innsbrucker just sent me an IM, and he's a very wisdom-filled person. He says port has 4 letters, as does left, and I will never forget which side is port now. So thanks, John I. Once again, we can see that Dragon Freedom has made initial contact there with the International Space Station. Just a gorgeous view there.
And again, we've had confirmation that soft capture rings retracted. Again, just standing by, we heard that the MCS handover, the motion control system on stations occurred, and now it's going to be time for those hard capture rings to start engaging. Again, there's 12 of them total. The first 6 have started to drive. They're done in 2 gangs of 6 each. This this is the second time in this Dragon flight that we've done something with these hooks. 6 of these are engaged during the launch and ascent portion, holding the nose cone in place, which you can see is open and swung out to the right there of the International Docking Adapter. Those drive open and release the nose cone shortly after Dragon gets on orbit, and now 6 of those driving to do our initial gang of hooks to start that hard mate process, and then once they're in place, the second 6 will drive, and we'll have a hard mate of Dragon to the space station.
Now, for those of you that might be wondering, excuse me, what the half black and half white part of Dragon is, that is the unpressurized section known as the trunk. The side that is black, that's actually covered in solar panels. So that is what the Dragon capsule utilizes while on orbit and making its way to the space station, essentially to provide power, generate power. So we only have them on one side of the trunk, and the other side of the trunk is just painted white. You can I was just going to say, you can just barely make out the heat shield there at the bottom of the pressurized section, just above the unpressurized section. So,
yeah, and we just heard that the first set of 6 hooks have engaged, and so now the second are driving.
Once again, this is the hard capture, which is basically the final capture of the Dragon spacecraft to the International Space Station.
Yeah, so once that second set of hooks are driving, we'll get confirmation of a hard mate, and then we jump right into the hatch operations, and the crew on board Dragon will get the go to get out of their seats, out of their suits, and start be free to move about the cabin, essentially. And start getting ready to open up the hatches. They'll hook their suits up to fans to dry them out before they get stowed, and then they'll have a couple of different tasks to do after we get the hatches open in Dragon to just get it ready for that docked operations. And a lot of it's focused on the atmospheric control on board Dragon. They're going to be removing what's called a LiO canister, a lithium hydroxide canister that is used to scrub CO2 from the Dragon cabin during free flight. They'll remove that and seal it, as we're going to be essentially integrating Dragon's cabin with the rest of the space station. And so not only will Dragon be able to use station power, station data, and communications, but will flow air from the station stack into Dragon and integrate it with all of its life support systems, generating oxygen, scrubbing carbon dioxide while it's attached. And we are hearing that the second set of hooks are closed, and we'll stand by.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop, 12 good hooks, hard capture complete.
There on your screen is SpaceX Core Crew Operations and Resources Engineer, Jake Vendel. The core acts as the primary communication point from the Mission Control Center here in Hawthorne to the crew on board Dragon. All right, so now that Dragon has completed the docking sequence, the spacecraft must undergo a handful of checks before we will be able to open the hatch. The crew on board Dragon will now get a chance to get out of their suits before moving into hatch operations.
That's right, and things are going to be picking up on Station 2. NASA's Tom Marshburn is going to be the lead for all of the hatch operations on the station side. First, he's going to have to open up a hatch to gain access to the pressurized mating adapter and the docking adapter. And then he's going to start pressurizing that vestibule, that small space between the two. So we've got confirmation hard captures complete, and now we're ready to get into those hatch operations. One more time, if you missed it, docking occurred at 4:37 and 49 seconds. Pacific time, that's 11:37 and 49 seconds GMT, while both vehicles were flying 261 statute miles over the Central Pacific. Now, with Dragon firmly attached, we're going to toss it over to the International Space Station Flight Control Room in Houston for Shaniqua Vereen to take us through the next steps as we get ready to open up the hatches. Shaniqua?
Thanks, Dan, and thanks, Hawthorne, for your help today. We had a very exciting moment here in Mission Control Houston as well, following Dragon's docking at 6:37 p.m. Central Time while flying 261 statute miles over the central part of the Pacific Ocean. It's great to see Dragon docked. The energy in the room here is high. There was applause and smiles all around the room. Now that we're docked, like Dan mentioned, Tom Marshburn is securing some hardware and then moving right into hatch operations. First, we'll get the large hatch at Node 2 Zenith, giving them access inside the pressurized mating adapter. Then we'll have to pressurize the vestibule. And that was Core Jake Vendel in MCCX, SpaceX Mission Control in Hawthorne, California, giving the crew good words inside Dragon Freedom. Again, now that they are docked, Tom Marshburn inside the station is securing some hardware and then moving right into hatch operations. First,
Dragon,
we'll open the large
SpaceX on Dragon to ground. No response required. Cameras are external.
We're currently in between satellites, and you're now seeing a live view inside the International Space Station Flight Control Room. Once we have views
Dragon,
back.
SpaceX on Dragon to ground. No response required. For your awareness, we'll be clearing the RGPS-1 alert shortly.
And Freedom copy. Thank you.
SpaceX Freedom on the cabin mic comm check.
Freedom, SpaceX on Dragon to ground. I had you 5x5 on the cabin mic.
Copy, thanks.
If you're just joining us, we have live coverage as we just watched as Crew Dragon Freedom docked to the International Space Station at 6:37 p.m. Central Time while flying 261 statute miles over the central part of the Pacific Ocean. Now that Dragon is docked, Tom Marshburn, as well as the rest of his crew, is securing some hardware and then moving right into the hatch operations. First, he will open the large hatch at Node 2 Zenith, giving them access inside the pressurized mating adapter. Then we'll have to pressurize the vestibule, which is that small space between the hatches on Dragon and the space station. This was previously exposed to vacuum prior to docking, and we will need to fill it with air and make sure its pressure is nearly equal with the atmospheric pressures on Dragon and the station. Marshburn will use a small valve on the station's hatch to slowly introduce air into the vestibule. Flight controllers here in Houston will monitor the pressure and the temperature readings inside and verify that everything is leak-free before we get ready to open up the hatches. We expect this to take about 2 hours to get everything pressurized and checked out before we open the hatches. With Dragon's hatch currently targeted to open a little bit after 8 p.m. Central Time. Following hatch open, the crew will configure Dragon for an on-orbit ops and get a safety briefing. A few hours after that, Russian cosmonauts will wake up to begin their day, which will include a spacewalk. They will also have welcoming remarks with the 4 astronauts.
Dragon, SpaceX on Dragon to ground. ISS crew has begun vestibule pressurization. Feel free to reference 4.400 section 4 for telemetry if you'd like.
And Freedom copies, that didn't work.
You're currently seeing inside the International Space Station as Tom Marshburn and Kjell Lindgren are preparing the area for the crew to ingress the space station. They're currently removing baggage and stowage area out of the way so there's more room for the crew to float through. And clarification, that was Rasha Chari and Kjell Lindgren removing stowage to prepare for the crew to float through once the hatch is open. Now docked, Tom Marshburn, current station commander, is now securing some hardware and moving into the hatch operations. You saw other crew members just removing stowage from the area, preparing for it to give them access to inside the pressurized mating adapter. They'll then be able to pressurize the vestibule, that space between the hatches on Dragon and the space station. This was previously exposed to vacuum prior to docking.
SpaceX on the big loop, ISS power connection established.
Freedom copies.
With the earlier docking time, we also expect the hatch to open just as early, around the 8 p.m. time frame Central Time. It takes about 2 hours to get everything pressurized and checked out before we open the hatches between Dragon and the station. Following hatch open, there typically would be a welcome ceremony. However, the crew will be awaiting the Russian cosmonauts to awake and have welcome remarks with the rest of the other 4 crew members. Crew 4 will join them and make a complement of 11 astronauts doing welcoming remarks. That'll happen around 1:40 a.m. Central Time. Currently on station is Crew 3 astronauts. That's astronauts Kjell Lindgren, Rasha Chari, Tom Marshburn, ESA or European Space Agency astronaut Matthias Maurer. Also aboard the space station is Russian cosmonauts Sergei Korsakov, Oleg Artemyev, and Denis Matveyev. Currently on your screen is NASA astronaut Kjell Lindgren going through a stowage bag. Dragon is currently in repress, about 5 more minutes on the leak checks, and about 45 minutes after that, we're looking for the hatch to open right around that 8 p.m. Central Time frame. If you're just joining us, we have live mission coverage of NASA's SpaceX Crew 4 mission to the International Space Station, where they'll stay for a 6-month rotational mission. Dragon has officially docked to the station around 6:37 p.m. Central Time, and we're now awaiting repress of repress and pressurization of the vestibule between the space station and the Dragon Freedom capsule. Flight controllers here in Mission Control Houston are monitoring the pressure and temperature readings inside and verifying that nothing's leaking before we get ready to open up the hatches. We're expecting it to take another 45 minutes to get everything pressurized and checked out before we open the hatches up for Dragon and the station, currently targeted to open up around 8 p.m. Central Time. Following hatch open, we'll see the crew, along with the other 7 astronauts on board the station, eagerly awaiting to greet their new crewmates. Post hatch open, that will end our coverage today, but we'll actually come back on air around 1:40 a.m. Central Time to see the crew welcome remarks, where Crew 3 astronauts, NASA astronauts Kayla Barron, Rasha Chari, Tom Washburn, ESA astronaut Matthias Maurer, and Russian cosmonauts Sergei Korsakov, Oleg Artemyev, and Denis Matveyev all greet and welcome each other aboard. You're currently seeing live views inside the International Space Station in the Harmony module, where Kayla Barron, in your bottom left-hand corner, is beginning to do some preparations, or continuing preparations for the arrival for Crew 4. They docked at the International Space Station at 6:37 p.m. Central Time while flying 261 statute miles above the Central Pacific Ocean.
Dragon, SpaceX on Dragon to ground for status.
And SpaceX from Freedom, we've got 4 of us out of the suits. We are continuing through the 2 procedures, 4.012 and 4.400, and you are welcome to come back on board if you want.
Okay, copy all, Farmer. Thanks for the update. A quick update for you. We're seeing indications of a good vestibule leak check. Stand by for more. And we'll bring the cameras back on board.
Okay, copy that. And for your awareness, we're about 12 minutes into the suit dry cycle.
Copy, 12 minutes.
You just heard calls from the core, or the Crew Operations Resource Engineer at SpaceX, into the Crew Dragon Freedom, telling the crew about a good vestibule check. And the crew reported back that they have doffed their suits, or taken off their suits, and they are preparing for hatch open as well, running through some checks on their side before the hatches can be opened.
Dragon, SpaceX on Dragon to ground. Cameras are back on board. We see Jessica's glove.
Copy that. Welcome back.
You're back seeing live views inside Crew Dragon Freedom. You currently see a couple empty suits still in the chairs as the crew are continuing to do preparations to open the hatch and ingress the International Space Station. We're looking for that ingress to happen around 30 minutes from now.
Dragon and Houston on ground 2 on the big loop.
Station's listening on the big loop.
And Freedom's ready on the big loop.
Houston is reconfiguring for hardline comm during this next 5 minutes. You will be down vehicle to vehicle. You'll still have Dragon to ground and space to ground.
Station copies. Station copies.
Freedom copies.
And that was Capcom Alex Kanalinkos here in Mission Control Houston, relaying to the Dragon crew aboard Freedom that their comm to comm for station to Dragon will be down about 5 minutes, but they'd still have connection through space to ground and Dragon to ground to Mission Control Houston. NASA astronaut Kayla Barron running through her procedures and checklists on her iPad, Velcroed to her leg as she's running through procedures to continue preparations for Crew 4's arrival and ingress out of the Dragon into the International Space Station.
Station and Dragon, Houston on the big loop. We are ready for vehicle-to-vehicle voice checks on hardline.
Station
Copies. 2 Freedom, how do you hear?
Hey, Freedom,
on the big
copies,
loop.
and we're
Switch
ready.
route 2.
And Freedom on the big loop is ready for voice checks. And Freedom's ready for voice checks on the big loop.
And Houston, Freedom, we have you loud and clear on station.
And Station Freedom has you loud and clear also.
Houston copies. Good voice checks.
SpaceX Freedom for inventory.
Freedom SpaceX on Dragon to ground, ready to copy. Okay, Jessica, to read back 2 meals from 309, 2 meals from 301, 5 water bottles from 208, and the rest of the meals are per the packing plan.
That's a good readback.
Okay, copy all. Thanks for the report. I want to clarify, does that include the morning meal inventory from a few hours ago?
Affirm. The meals in 309 and 301 were our breakfast this morning, and we haven't consumed any food since.
Okay, copy all. Thanks for the clarification. Sounds good.
We're currently in a brief handover between satellites. You currently see a live view inside the International Space Station Flight Control Room, but we'll get views of Dragon and inside the space station back to you shortly.
Dragon, SpaceX on Dragon to ground for 4.400.
And go for freedom.
Okay, Freedom, we expect that the ISS side is close to ready for hatch open. We're hoping you can step into section 5 of 4.400 for the waste system flush, and we will stand by for a report on which water bottle you intend to use for that task.
Okay, Freedom copies the status. We have water bottles set aside from bag 208 that are already accounted. They were partially used before. We're going to use those for the waste flush.
Okay, copy all. Thanks for the clarification. Sounds good.
For those of you just joining us, Crew 4 NASA astronauts Kjell Lindgren, Bob Hines, and Jessica Watkins, and European Space Agency astronaut Samantha Cristoforetti had a successful launch this morning around 2:52 a.m. Central Time from Launch Complex 39A at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. We saw Crew 4 on Dragon Freedom dock to the International Space Station at 6:37 p.m. Central Time. We're looking for them to open hatches to let the crew ingress in just about 18 minutes from now. That's 8 p.m. Central Time. We're looking for the crew to be able to ingress, to open hatches and ingress into the International Space Station. We're in a brief handover period currently between satellites, and we'll have views of Dragon and the International Space Station back shortly. You are currently seeing a live view of the International Space Station Flight Control Room here in Houston, Texas, where Flight Director Adi Bulos saw us through integrated operations as well as docking. To his right, you see Alex Kanalenkos, the Capcom or the capsule communicator, who you'll hear talking to the crew from the ground up to the station.
Houston Dragon Station, we are ready for hatch equalization.
And Dragon copies. We're ready.
Station Houston on the big loop. We need about 3 to 4 minutes to finish equalization.
Station copies.
And Tom, just clarification on that. Your go to equalize, it will take 3 to 4 minutes.
Copy, go to equalize
and you're getting live views of Mission Control Houston, where flight controllers here are looking after the International Space Station, which Freedom Dragon just docked to around 6:37 p.m. Central Time. You just heard Capcom here in Mission Control Houston confirm with the crew that equalization is ready to start between ISS and Freedom. He also let the crew know that it would take about 3 to 4 minutes for that to continue and verify that the hatch is good to be open between the station and Freedom. Earlier, we did hear a call to the crew saying that the ISS side is close to ready for hatch to open and that the system flush was needed on the SpaceX Dragon side. Again, the clock has started from Freedom to the International Space Station for equalization. It's in progress, and we're looking for 3 to 4 minutes before that is complete. Again, we are between satellites and currently in a loss of signal, which is expected at this time. And so we're waiting on views to return from Dragon and the International Space Station. As we wait, we are in the middle of a timer as equalization is underway. And that's waiting on pressurization to equalize between Freedom and the space station before the hatch can be opened. Again, we're in the middle of pressurization to equalize pressure between Freedom and the space station.
SpaceX, ready to copy on Dragon to ground.
Hey, could you please take the cameras external? We're going to be changing into our full suits.
Okay, copy all, Kjell. We'll take the cameras external, get right back to you. Freedom SpaceX, cameras are external.
Station Houston on Space to Ground 3, no response required. We see in the video, just letting you know that we're reconfiguring the potable water source, so you may hear some valve movement. Copy, thumbs up.
And that was thumbs up from the crew as they heard from Capcom. And we have good equalization on the ISS and between Dragon and the ISS. As soon as the space craft crew Dragon Freedom is ready, I'm told that we are ready to have hatch open just here shortly. Again, we're looking for that to happen around 8 p.m. Central Time.
Dragon SpaceX on Dragon to ground for next steps.
Freedom's ready, copy.
All right, Freedom, the ISS is ready. Ground teams are also ready for Dragon hatch opening on your go. Sorry, you have a go to open the forward hatch, and then contact us per step 6.6 of 4.400.
Okay, copy. It's going to take us about 5 to 10 more minutes.
Okay, copy all.
And you just heard from the Crew Operations Resource Engineer, or CORE at SpaceX, telling Crew Dragon, the crew aboard Dragon, that they are ready to open the hatch as soon as they are ready. The crew did report they need about 5 to 10 more minutes before they're ready to open. But that's great news to hear that we are ready here shortly, around 8 p.m. Central Time, to open the hatch. Again, preparations continuing on both sides.
Station Houston on Space to Ground 3 for Kayla. Notice in your, just above and to your right, there's a CPA cable sticking out. If you can tuck that back in, just so, yes, that right there, so it doesn't get snagged. Thank you so much.
And you just heard Capcom Alex Kanalenkos giving a few checks left to the crew inside the International Space Station to prepare for the ingress of Crew 4. As you can see, preparations are still continuing between the ISS and on Crew Dragon Freedom. The Crew 4 astronauts are getting things configured and will join the 7-person crew on station, bringing the total crew members on station to 11. You currently see a view of all 4 Crew 3 members, while the 3 Russian cosmonauts sleep. We will be back on air after hatch opening around 1:40 a.m. and all 11 crew members will be awake for welcoming remarks. If you're just joining us, you're looking live inside the International Space Station as the crew aboard prepare for the ingress of Crew 4, which docked to the International Space Station's Zenith port on the Harmony module at 6:37 p.m. Central Time. Pressurization and equalization has happened, and we are waiting for the SpaceX Crew Dragon Freedom crew members to open their hatch and ingress the International Space Station. With about a 15 or 16 hour rendezvous to docking, this was one of the fastest, if not the fastest, commercial crew flights to the International Space Station. If you're just joining us, you're watching a live broadcast for the Crew 4 mission, which had a successful launch at 2:52 a.m. Central Time and docked to the space station at 6:37 p.m. Central today. Now we're just waiting for the crew to open the hatch and ingress or come aboard the space station, which will happen shortly. The crew on board station you see on the screen is NASA astronaut Kjell Lindgren and Rasha Chari. They're eagerly awaiting the Crew 4 astronauts to come aboard.
SpaceX Station, this is Freedom on Big Loop. We are ready for hatch opening.
Freedom SpaceX on the Big Loop, go for hatch opening.
Station copies.
Dragon SpaceX on the Big Loop, hoping to bring cameras on board.
Please come aboard.
And you just heard a few checks from the Crew Operations Resource Engineer, or the core at SpaceX. Great news with that go for hatch opening. And we do have a go for hatch open, but we are waiting on the crew inside Dragon to finish some preparations and open the hatch. After the hatch is open, it probably will take another few minutes for the crew to ingress the space station and be welcomed to their new home for the next 6 months as a part of the Expedition 67 crew. They will continue to walk through some procedures as they ingress, before ingressing the International Space Station. They are looking to install IMV ducting, mixing the air of the space station environment with the air inside the Crew Dragon Freedom. They'll seal some of the IO, or lithium hydroxide cartridges that scrubbed carbon dioxide inside the Dragon capsule on the ride to the International Space Station. They'll check some vent valves as well, so they may be just a little bit more time until we welcome them on board. And Dragon hatch is open, and they are welcoming the Crew 4 astronauts on board. You see all smiles around as Jessica Watkins, Bob Hines, Samantha Cristoforetti have ingressed and are hugging all their current Crew 3 crew members. And last one in, we see Commander of Dragon, Kjell Lindgren, now entering into the International Space Station. You're currently looking at all 8 crew members of Crew 3 and 4 together inside the Harmony module, welcoming the new crew aboard. Crew 3 and Crew 4 will do what's called a direct handover. For the next 5 days, there'll be 2 Dragons docked to the International Space Station. Crew 3 currently set to undock in just about 5 days from now.
Station Houston on Space to Ground 3, no response required. Just letting you know, PWD is going to be down 10 to 15 minutes. Sorry for the timing, but... And Kjell, I'll owe you a beverage when you come back home.
Houston Station IMV duct installation is complete. Go for IMV fan activation.
Houston copies.
55 seconds, Challenger 21.
Wow, what an incredible morning. It is so great to see Crew 4 astronauts finally on board the International Space Station. After about a 15-hour flight, the crew is now aboard and ready to continue their 6-month rotational mission aboard the International Space Station. They were welcomed by the current space station crew members of Crew 3. The full complement, now up to 11 human beings as a part of the Expedition 67 crew. It's been an incredible 24 hours, and with Crew 4 now aboard the International Space Station. That's it for us in Houston. Welcome aboard, Crew 4. Now let's turn it over to Hawthorne.
Thanks, Shaniqua. So great to see Crew 4 on board. As she said, it's been quite a 24 hours. We had everything kicked off really with Suit Up. That was actually yesterday around 11:50 p.m. Eastern Time. And then later on, a couple hours later, we saw the crew ingress into Dragon Freedom. That was around 1:17 a.m. Eastern. And then, of course, we had an on-time liftoff from Kennedy Space Center Pad 39A at 3:52 a.m. Eastern this morning. That was followed by a Stage 1 landing on our drone ship, a successful Dragon separation, as well as deployment of the nose cone, which we saw in action on our webcasts. And then if you joined us earlier this afternoon, you saw the 5 major burns that Dragon performed as it approached the International Space Station. We were able to confirm docking at 7:37 p.m. Eastern, and then we just saw ingress into station just a couple minutes ago. So super exciting. On behalf of SpaceX and NASA, I want to thank you for watching today's webcast and for your interest in this exciting 4th rotational mission.
Yeah, and now that the crew's on board, they've got a couple of tasks to go through. Shaniqua was talking about they're going to be integrating Dragon's cabin with that on board the station, on the ride uphill. Dragon has its own ECLIS environmental control life support system regulating temperature, humidity control, scrubbing CO2, and that temperature, by the way, can be actively controlled by the astronauts on the displays or changed by the team here in Mission Control Hawthorne. And so they have to install that IMV ducting. We heard that done, the intermodular ventilation, integrate Dragon's cabin atmosphere with the rest of the station. They're also installing some seals around the hatchway around Dragon and a hatch cover as well. And with them arrived, we're less than a week away now from the return of Crew 3. So pretty much everything we just saw, we're going to see in reverse as those 4 crew members get ready to come home and end their long-duration stay on board the station. As you heard, right now we're targeting May 4th for that return. Everything is going to depend on weather, so be sure to follow NASA and SpaceX as we're going to be bringing you live coverage of their entire journey, but then follow us on social media for real-time updates as we continue counting down to the end of the Crew 3 mission. So thank you again for watching. Go NASA, go SpaceX, go Crew 4, and pretty soon come home Crew 3. With that, we'll wrap it up, and we'll see you again real soon.
I got a ride.